Fasting has become such a theme on this podcast. Everybody talks about the importance of fasting, even if it's just an intermittent fast every once in a while, or just 8, 10, 12 hours here and there, fasting. So I thought I'd better get on a fasting expert on Zestology. Hello and welcome to the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. This is Zestology. I'm Tony Wrighton in the park in South London as this country begins to thaw after a very long winter. And hopefully I don't sound like I'm quite so out of breath, because the last few times I've been recording this podcast, it's been absolutely freezing. I've had my anorak huddled over my head and I've been absolutely Baltic. So much warmer today, and that's feeling really good. Everything's kind of waking up. It's really nice. So yeah, fasting's been a bit of a theme for the last few years. I've been doing intermittent fasting, either with bulletproof coffee or black coffee or nothing, or like a kind of water fast. And one of the things I was interested in doing is speaking to an expert on Zestology who knows all about this. So I got in touch with Loren Lockman. He is a director of the Tanglewood Wellness Centre. He's got quite an interesting story. He's based in, I think, Costa Rica. And he moved there years ago. And since 1992, he's been taking people in massive, extreme fasts. And as you hear, I am so lightweight compared to the kind of thing he does. For me, a decent fast is like, I'll start at kind of 10 in the evening and finish at, I don't know, midday the next day or something like that. And maybe you're allowed a black coffee in between. And there's no doubt, it seems, from many of the guests that come on Zestology, plenty of benefits to be had from either a 14 or a 16-hour fast. But when you start to get into longer fasts, you can really see some big changes. If you start to do a 24-hour fast, may not sound like much fun, but actually, as it turns out, the longer you fast, the better you feel. And I've done 2 recently when I was over in Thailand, and I recorded a couple of podcasts over there if you haven't heard them. Did a couple of 24-hour fasts, and at the end of it I felt great. I didn't even feel that hungry. The body, it seems, starts to regenerate itself. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right way of putting it, but I know a man who can describe it much better than I, and that is Loren Lockman, a man who is completely committed to helping you optimize your health and wellness. And this podcast is all about energy and vitality, and it seems to me that every once in a while not eating could give you more energy. Seems counterproductive, doesn't it? What, you're not going to have your bowl of cornflakes at breakfast time? Well, no, actually I'm not, and I might feel better for it. Let's hear more then from an expert, and be warned, he is a bit hardcore. I mean, it's like, I should probably put, I'm going to put a disclaimer right now. Don't do anything that you hear in this podcast without seeking the advice of a health professional first. Your doctor or your functional medicine practitioner or whoever it is. Here he is, Loren Lockman on Zestology. Loren, thanks so much for joining me on Zestology. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Tony.
I have been dabbling in intermittent fasting and even tried my first kind of slightly longer water fasts for a while, which is why I basically need to talk to an expert, because I don't really know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I've been dabbling a bit myself.
Yeah, you have. How long have you been doing this for?
Well, I've been fasting now for 30 plus years. And I've been intermittent fasting. I never called it that. I didn't hear that term until a few years ago, but I stopped eating breakfast 26 years ago and eat 2 meals a day, usually 4 or 5 hours apart. So I've got a 18 to 20 hour break from food every day.
Good. Yeah. That's not quite what I'm doing, but I think we should start with saying, why? For people who've never done this before and look forward to breakfast the first thing they get up. Certainly for me, that has been a big change. Whether it's a bulletproof coffee or a coffee or nothing, my stomach just loves not having food in the morning. But why is it good for us?
Well, so first of all, let's start with the idea that processing food requires approximately half of the body's energy, according to experts. And so when we are processing food, obviously we need to eat. I mean, there are people that believe we don't, that they're few and far between. Most of us are pretty clear we need to fuel up at some point. And when we need food, it makes perfect sense to do it. we might want to be more conscious of what we're putting in our bodies. I'm a big proponent of that and teach people how to eat optimally as well. That's another subject. But when we're eating things, when we're consuming anything that the body doesn't need, we're using energy that is now not available to the body to cleanse and heal. And so there are many things that happen when we give the body a break, even a relatively short one. In my world, as I said, I never considered 20 hours without food to be any kind of fasting. I just called it life. My guess, Tony, is that through most of human history, most people on the planet could probably only afford to eat once or twice a day.
Right, or they had to go and pick or kill their food, and therefore they just didn't have it to hand. So it's kind of quite paleo. It's quite caveman, this whole scenario, isn't it?
In a sense, yeah. I'm not aligned with paleo per se, but I everything I teach and practice is based on trying to understand the laws of nature, which I've been paying attention to now for 42 years, and teach those things, use them myself and teach them to my clients. And so it's completely about trying to imitate what happens in nature. I just completed a lecture 5 minutes ago. I was just talking about the fact that in nature, no other species except human beings has the ability to have instant gratification when it comes to food. Maybe cows, sheep, and goats, maybe herbivores. They go to sleep in a field, they wake up in a field, they're surrounded by grass. But most species have to go find something to eat. And only humans can walk into the kitchen, they've got 3 or 4 weeks worth of food right there, can instantly eat something, whether they need to or not.
So what happens, and I've been frenziedly Googling this over the last few weeks and months, which is why I'm so pleased to have you on. What happens when we do start fasting for, say, okay, firstly, let's say the kind of 14 hours, and then 18 hours, and then 24 hours. And then I know you do up to 5 days, don't you, at your retreat in Costa Rica?
No, I'm afraid that's not true.
Oh, okay.
Our normal longest fast here is just over 6 weeks.
No food?
No food, just water. And and if that's
wow.
if we've already blown anyone's minds, or that's beyond the scope of this call today, I could probably make myself available to come back and talk about it if you want to. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, no, I want to cover that. But I do also think that, people listening to this, most people won't even be doing 14 hours. Some people will be doing like intermittent fasting. So let's ease in slowly, Loren, and then we'll work up to. By the end of the hour, we'll be on 6 weeks. I've no doubt about it.
No problem.
Yeah.
Let me start by saying, first of all, what happens as soon as the body is done processing food. So, we eat a typical meal. Let's say, it's a typical English meal. We're not even going to talk about necessarily trying to get healthy, just whatever the average person might be eating, fish and chips, whatever else it might be. It can take up to 3 hours to digest that food in the stomach. The body then moves into the pyloric valve opens. It drops into the duodenum. The liver secretes from the gallbladder, if there's a gallbladder intact, any bile to emulsify any fats. That's a whole separate project. That's a fair amount of work for the body, and then it makes its journey through the intestinal tract. And in a typical person, it takes 4 days, average, to move from the mouth to the other end, so that whatever's left over can exit the body. That's average. It should be 8 to 12 hours. And there are people, obviously if the average is 4 days and the optimal is 8 to 12, there's got to be people on the other end of the spectrum who are taking 10 days, 2 weeks or longer to eliminate. Okay? So as the body makes its way, now it's making its way through roughly 32 feet of digestive tract, from the mouth to the anus. It's a long journey. What's happening is the food has been digested in the stomach. It then moves into the small intestine, and we begin to assimilate vitamins, enzymes, phytonutrients, some water. Most of the water will stay with the food if there's any water there. And as it moves through the large intestine, in the transverse colon, we absorb minerals that the body needs. Most of it happens there. In the ascending colon. In the transverse colon, which moves across the belly, right? That's where the body takes up any excess water. Now, if you're eating high water content foods like fruit or salad, which, by the way, is all I eat, if you're eating those things, we're getting a lot of water, perfect water from our food, and that's being absorbed in the transverse colon.
You only eat fruit and salad.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying it.
Yeah.
We'll see if it works. It's just an experiment. It's only been 26 and a half years so far.
Okay, so
we'll see.
So sorry, carry on. So the fruit in the salad is sitting there.
Right, and what's happening is, by the time it gets to the transverse colon, it's been completely digested. The body's theoretically extracted whatever it wants or needs from the food. It then takes in the excess water because let's say we're talking about a green salad. If you have a big green salad for lunch, I'm not sure how often that happens in London these days, but leafy greens like lettuce are around 96% water. Cucumbers are 96% water. Tomatoes are around 92% water, maybe 94%. Avocados are only about 80% water. But, a typical salad's going to be still very high in water content compared to most foods. And the body doesn't want to lose that perfect water because most people need this water. So it's absorbed in the transverse colon. It's taken out of the stool. And then whatever's left moves into the rectum to be ready to be eliminated. Okay, which shouldn't take very long in a typical system. Now, what's happening for most people, first of all, is that we are, and I hope this isn't too far off track, but in most people's bodies, with the way most people are eating, the stuff that's coming in contains very little water, relatively dry. And so the body
how much water does like a McDonald's have, for example?
Well, the bun, let's say a Big Mac, a bun has probably no water, virtually zero water.
Wow.
The meat, flesh contains water, but we cook much of the water out of it.
Okay.
So it might be 40 to 45% water.
Okay.
I've estimated that, and I've been really paying a lot of attention to this over many years now. Here at my center, Tanglewood, which is 21 years old in a couple weeks, we've taken thousands of people through this fasting process. They're here for an average of 5 weeks, and it's absolutely clear that most people. We actually measure people's hydration levels using bioimpedance analysis. Most people are pretty severely dehydrated.
Right.
And the worse the diet is, the more dehydrated they are. Typically, the older they are, as Tony picks up his glass to drink, the older they are, the more dehydrated they are. Because it's a cumulative thing. It's accumulating over time. So the older someone is, the more years they've been dehydrated, usually the worse it is. And that's typical. Young people are usually in slightly better shape, although given that the average young person's diet today is pretty crap, not necessarily much better off.
And so if we've got the 14-hour fast, does that help? Does that encourage things to move through quicker?
Well, as long as someone's taking in the water that they need, then we're helping the body. In order to eliminate this old material, there are two things that need to happen. One, we need to have time to be breaking this material down, because the digestive tract can do its best to break this stuff down, but that doesn't happen if we're constantly eating. So when I asked a group of clients. I was speaking a couple of months ago in Panama City and did a full day seminar. That I asked the people there, how many meals do you eat on average? And I think the average was 5 times a day people put something in their mouth from the group that was there. 5 times a day. And that's, those are during the roughly 16 to 18 waking hours per day that people have, which means every 2.5 to 3 hours, most people are putting something in their mouth. It takes 3 to 4 hours in the stomach for people to digest most of the things that people eat. That means that the digestive system is literally constantly working.
Right, so it knackers you out because the digestive system's just on the go the whole time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so what we're doing by fasting is the digestive system has a chance to get rid of it all so we can chill out.
That's right. So the body begins to dump the toxic stuff from the system. And you're probably not aware of this, Tony. Very few people are. But the 2016 Nobel Prize for Medicine was given to a Japanese PhD. I don't remember his name now. Osumi. And he won the prize. What he'd been doing for the last 25 years was studying how the body cleanses itself of toxic material in the absence of food. It's called autophagy. Yeah. But he's looking at how the body is detoxifying, cleansing when we're not eating. Okay, and that's one of the reasons that we fast, whether it's short-term or long-term. For serious cleansing, it's longer term. Again, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that.
Autophagy kicks in. That's when the body starts eating, getting rid of dead cells. Is that right? Is that a good simplification of it or not? Probably not.
Yes, well, it's not just dead cells, but I mean, yes, it basically means self-consumption. So the body is consuming and getting rid of, defective cells that should. Here's an example. Today, roughly 50% of the English people in America, I'm from the U.S., I live in Costa Rica, but I'm from the U.S., about 50% of our populations are going to wind up with a cancer problem.
Right.
But it's said by the experts who study cancer that 100% of the population has cancer cells developing in the body every single day. So why do half the population wind up with a problem, wind up with a big tumor? Well, what's happening is their immune systems aren't healthy enough to be destroying these cancer cells as they form. This is a normal function of the body to be able to destroy these cancer cells, and that's what autophagy is. So, but it can't happen in the average body because the body is burdened with excess food because the immune system is too weak and it's incapable of doing its job. When we take a break from eating, the body has the ability to put that energy that's normally processing food back into doing whatever else it needs to do. And so and it starts on a surface level. So we could, autophagy theoretically is indeed simply about breaking down its own cells, but it's also getting rid of whatever else it doesn't need. It knows all the garbage in the body that doesn't belong there that it's never had a chance to get rid of. So for instance, plaque in the arteries, we see with the longer term fast we see here, even from the first day, when people come in, if they're old enough and they have enough hypertension, which usually means a lot of plaque, we see that we can see evidence that the body's breaking that plaque down right away.
But are they actually eating nothing for 5 weeks? Because I had a look at your website and it seems that most of the fasts that you do, people come in and they'll do 5 days or something, then they'll eat for a couple of days, lightly, and then they'll do another 5 days. Is that not right?
No, it's not right. It's a misunderstanding, and I apologize if it's not clear. Our average. No,
I just had a quick look, so I probably just didn't pay enough attention. But
yeah, the average. Maybe you were just thinking that's what it must be, but the average person is actually coming in.
It's just wishful thinking.
The average fast is actually 5 weeks, 26 days. It's 26 days. Excuse me. It's a 5-week stay. 26 days, no food. 26 days is average. And then 9 days of refeeding before they leave. So we gently bring them back from nothing to normal quantities of food. That's average. We right now we have one woman who's here for 2 weeks. That's very unusual for someone to be here for that short a time. We have several people who are doing 21 days, some people 26. We have a woman that just finished 35. We have 2 gentlemen that just completed 42 days. My longest fast ever was a young Englishman from London who fasted for, are you ready? You're sitting down, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm ready.
He fasted for 5.5 months.
Why?
I take it back. 4.5 months.
Why?
Why? Well, he had stage 4 testicular cancer
and
congestive heart failure. He was told he was going to be dead within a month or two.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. In fact, by the time he was completed with his fast, there was no trace of cancer. Now, come back. We've just been talking about cancer. Cancer cells form every day in the human body. I have no cancer. You have no cancer probably because your body is healthy enough to be able to destroy those cancer cells as quickly as they're forming. The body gets rid of them. It only happens in a body that's burdened, that's incapable, that doesn't have a healthy enough immune system, that it's incapable of doing that. So what happens is, there was a study published at the University of California.
Let's just go back to the guy that came 4.5 months. So he's eating nothing in that time. How come he didn't?
18.5 weeks.
How come he didn't die?
Well, all right. Let's back up just a tiny bit. So we need to have fat to survive. Okay.
Yeah.
And about 2% of your body has to be held in fat. That's called essential fat. When we get beyond that, it's not essential. And yet, I can only see it from the shoulders up. You look like you're pretty lean. My guess is you might be 10 or 12% body fat, unless you got a big belly. You're hiding.
I think that's probably about right. Yeah, pretty low body fat. Yeah.
Yeah. I know them when I see one. I usually guess. We measure that, and I guess pretty well. I've measured thousands of people over the last 20 years. The average guy that we see here is closer to 25% body fat, and the average woman is closer to 30 to 35% body fat.
When they arrive.
Which means most people show up here anywhere from, let's say, 10 at the low end, from 10 to 15 or even 20 times more fat than they need to have to survive, to be alive.
Right, but that means they can fast for ages because they've got all those reserves.
The body, that's the point I want to make. The body holds this fat on purpose because in nature there are floods and fires and droughts, and there are conditions where it might be difficult for animals to find food. So animals have to be able to go a long time without eating, and we're no different. Our bodies are intended to carry some reserves so that we can go for a while without eating. Now, the crazy thing is, even though you're relatively lean, I'm relatively lean, I'm around 7% body fat, even though we're both lean people, we could still fast for 6 weeks. Because what happens when someone's very lean, they go through their reserves much more slowly than someone who's got more reserves.
And this guy, the 4.5 months guy, I mean, look, I totally buy into the idea of autophagy. Is there a sense that this idea of fasting, people might listen to this and have cancer, and they might be saying, well, why on earth isn't everyone doing this? Why on earth am I taking chemotherapy? And is it kind of giving false hope to people almost? Well,
I hope not. I think it's giving real hope to people. It's not false hope. I mean, there is a way to heal from cancer in most cases. Not every case, because sometimes it's too late. There are times where the body cannot recover because there's been enough damage, or it's too late. It's just progressed to a certain extent that it won't be able to recover. But our bodies, like every other organism, were indeed intended to heal and to function at an amazingly high level. Okay, let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to digress for just a moment, because let me tell you, and I think it's important to say this. You've said that I have a lot of experience with fasting, etc. We've gotten to that, but I think it's important for people to know I'm not a doctor and I'm not a nutritionist, and I'm largely self-taught. And for the last 20 years, I've run the largest water fasting center in the world. So there are very few people who've actually fasted more people than I have. But I came into this. My background was in finance, and I was working in Washington, D.C. for the second largest commercial real estate company in town. I was the youngest officer of the company. I have degrees in finance, both bachelor and most of a master's degree. I quit because I got what I wanted and didn't want to pay for any more. And I was doing quite well. But I got very, very sick 6 months out of college. And this was 34 years ago. And I got much worse with 3 years of medical care. And I realized that medicine wasn't helping me. It was making me worse. Now, my guess is you're probably already aware that medicine only suppresses symptoms. We can look at cancer. We're talking about cancer. You can take chemotherapy. You can get radiation. You can have a tumor removed. But do any of those things address the underlying issue? And people say, yeah, the problem was the tumor, right? No. The problem wasn't the tumor. Remember, cancer cells form in every body. The problem was there was some underlying imbalance in the body that allowed that tumor to form at all. It's not the appearance of the tumor, it's why the tumor showed up. And so what we're trying to do is not only eliminate the tumor, that's easy. We can cut it out. You can poison it. As you probably know, with radiation and chemotherapy, you're poisoning healthy cells as well. Okay, but what happens, I started to say a few minutes ago, there was a study published at the University of California about 4 years ago. I think it was Santa Barbara, California. And what they said was that fasting 3 days completely rejuvenates the immune system. Now, honestly, when that study was published, I had a group of people here who were on their 22nd day or 21st day, a whole group of people who'd already gone 3 weeks without eating. And I said, what do you think of this? Your immune system was completely rejuvenated in 3 days. And they all laughed, because what had happened for them 18 days later, after that 3-day point, was so much more powerful than anything that happened in the first 3 days. Yeah. It was a silly idea. But here's the thing.
But I feel a bit of an amateur considering about one day's fast, if you see what I mean. Like, it seems like so small compared to your 4.5 months, man.
Well, it is pretty small. And let's come back to that, because I think it's important. But let me just finish this thought. When people, all they studied at the University of California was fasting 3 days, and what they saw was what they believed was a complete rejuvenation of the immune system. But what if the actual ability of the immune system is so much greater than they've ever seen, they don't even know what that looks like? Okay, that's what I'm suggesting is happening. Because I went from being very, very sick and worse with 3 years of medicine. I decided finally, okay, I'm walking away from medicine. I haven't looked back. I haven't looked back. I've never used any medicine of any kind with the exception of for trauma. So accidents. I've been sewn back together a couple times. I nearly broke my back in a fall 2.5 meters onto concrete, and I did break my hip and my hand. And I went and got some medical care. But mostly what I do, and the only thing I really do, unless I believe I'm going to bleed to death, is I fast. Yeah. I let my body put all of its energy into healing, and I've seen amazing healing happen over and over again every single time.
That's
and
really cool.
in more than 30 years now, I haven't been sick one single day.
Just interrupting the interview for one moment to tell you that this podcast is brought to you by the website ketoclubuk.com, bringing you the best ketosis supplements, including something that I have every single day, brain octane in my coffee. You've probably heard me banging on about this bulletproof supplement before. Bulletproof brain octane, it's a type of MCT oil. It's pretty much the finest MCT oil that money can buy. And you can get it at a very good price on ketoclubuk.com. And if you're not in the UK, I'm not sure that you can get it. But if you are, it's a great place to go. And there's all kinds of info about keto on there as well. Right, back to the show. So let's start with the intermittent fasting then, because I kind of want to ease into this slowly. I've done intermittent fasting for a while. Yeah, I know it is a little bit. We're looking at 4.5 months right from the get-go.
Sorry, folks. I didn't mean to blow your mind. Yeah,
I have done 2 24-hour fasts in the last month, which is the first time I've done that. And it's funny, I've actually, every time I take a flight now, I just don't eat because I think the food's pretty terrible on a flight anyway. And there's also something about sitting down that means I don't seem to digest it properly. And when I get off the flight, or when I've done these 24-hour fasts, I've actually felt really good afterwards, but I have been looking forward to eating 24 hours and 1 minute after eating the last time. So what's going on? Let's say people are looking at a 16-hour fast. So they're looking intermittent fasting on a daily basis, finish food at like 8 in the evening and not eating until 12 the next day.
Right.
Is that good for us?
Absolutely. It's very good for us. Let's take a look at the actual physiology. Let's look at what's happening. Okay? So you eat a meal. Let's say that the joke with Chinese food is you're hungry an hour later. So you eat Chinese food, and what's going on? If an hour later your body's needing something, what does it do? Well, it looks to your digestive tract. Okay? It's actually going to go into your digestive tract to see what's there and to see if there's anything still useful. And typically, the body can use whatever's sitting in the digestive tract for 8 to 12 hours. Once we get beyond that point, even if there's still stuff in there, many people have a lot of stuff still in there. I mean, the average person, according to a study published in Denmark a few years ago, it's not unusual to have 5 to 10 kilos of old material sitting in the digestive tract. And I see that here. With every one of the thousands of clients I've taken through this process, everybody eliminates a lot of old hard material. And that's a whole separate subject, but I'm
glad to hear you're analysing it all anyway, Loren.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You can't beat a good look at what's come out.
Exactly. Well, you know what they say, that you've seen the bumper sticker, shit happens, right? Can I say that on there?
Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah.
I just did. So, shit happens. We might as well take a look at it. It tells us a lot. It actually and most people would be blown away if they understood the actual connection between how well we're eliminating and what's happening and their level of health and vitality. It's amazing what happens. So
I just want to ask you, the 16-hour fast, has autophagy started at that point?
Yes. It's really just, let's go back. Let's back up. So 8 to 12 hours, digestive tract. The next 8 to 12 hours, your body's looking primarily for fuel, right? We don't run on food. We actually run on microelectric current. Electricity the body creates. It stores it in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's like a body's battery, but it's making most of this electricity while we're sleeping. The food we eat is the fuel that we use to make the electricity, but we run on the electricity, not food. Okay, so when that fuel is primarily glucose, blood sugar. So when we get to 8 to 12 hours and there's no longer anything useful in the digestive tract, the body now goes to the liver. In the liver, we store glycogen. And glycogen is a glucose precursor. So the body can easily convert glycogen to glucose. Now, we also store glycogen in the muscles, but the body does not use muscle glycogen at this point. And the reason why, let's assume that you're injured and you have to rest for 3 or 4 days. Maybe you've broken your leg, you can't get up. Maybe it's going to be 3 weeks, you can't move. You're by yourself, you're in the forest, there's nothing to eat. What are you going to do, right? You're going to rest as comfortably as you can until you feel like you can get up and go find some food. It would be useful in that moment if you still had some strength in your muscles, and you do, because there's glycogen there to fuel the muscles.
Okay.
The body leaves that there. Okay, so we've got 8 to 12 hours worth of liver glycogen as fuel, and once that's been depleted, we're now at the 16-hour point. It's a minimum of 16 hours. It could be as much as 24. At this point, it's important to understand that the next thing the body does, and this sounds counterintuitive, it sounds crazy, but it's been absolutely measured. We measure muscle mass here. We see that this is what's happening. Your body goes to muscle next, and it begins to convert muscle into sugar because it's set up to run on glucose. And so if there's no other way to get glucose, it begins to convert muscle to sugar. It's called gluconeogenesis, which
and where do
means
ketones
sugar.
come in there?
Say again, where do ketones come in?
Yeah.
Ketones come in once the body has stopped using muscles for fuel. And so this tends to be, for the average person, it happens right around 3 days into the process.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we are fasting for a few hours, we're not in ketosis in most cases. Now, if someone, there's this new, it's a relatively new fad, it's dangerous, I believe it's idiotic, but there are people dry fasting. I'm probably just pushing some buttons. I do that sometimes. People dry fasting without drinking any water, and they somehow have come to believe that this is better. There's no science to suggest this whatsoever. There's no logic to suggest this. Yeah. And my own experience with hundreds of clients who have done this is not one of them got more benefit. The thing is, because they used to say we can only go a certain number of days without water. Well, people go much longer than that, but the reason why that's possible is because when we metabolize fat, the body actually makes water. It releases water as a byproduct. Okay. There's no water in fat, ironically, but it's like water is manufactured chemically when we break down fat, we metabolize fat. So someone who's fasting, who's severely dehydrated, their body's going to go into ketosis faster. And the reason why is because it wants to get water. It doesn't mean it's cleansing. Unfortunately, being in ketosis doesn't necessarily mean you're cleansing or healing. It just means the body's using fat for fuel, and it's doing that so it can get water.
But listening to you, I'm thinking there's not much point in intermittent fasting because it's going to take 16 hours before anything good actually even really starts to happen.
Well, it does take about 16 hours minimum to see any significant benefit. So when you started out by asking around 14 hours, I would say go 2 more hours for sure. Yeah. Make it 12 and 8 o'clock or 10 and 6, whatever it is. Find a schedule that works for where all your meals are in no more than an 8-hour window. Now, I have all my meals in a 4 to 6 hour window every day and have for 26 years. With very few exceptions.
So the body's starting to, and then you do longer fasts every once in a while. But on that intermittent fasting schedule, the body's starting to clear out some of the toxins, some of the junk. You've got rid of the glucose stores, the glycogen stores, and you're starting to kind of feel better.
That's right. And what's happening is, so it starts off with being a surface level cleanse because the body is starting out by looking at what's in the bloodstream. What garbage is in the bloodstream right now that it can get rid of? And it's normally not able to do this as effectively as it would like to because the body is so burdened with everything else it's doing. But our blood, all of our blood is being filtered through the kidneys roughly 60 times per day, every 24 minutes or so. The kidneys are filtering all the blood and dumping whatever doesn't belong in there. And this is how most toxins are eliminated from the body. Okay, toxic substances, let's say if you consume something, alcohol, for instance, is a cellular poison. The body sends it to the liver to metabolize the alcohol as well as it can. And then that stuff is dumped back into the bloodstream where it's filtered out through the kidneys. So the byproducts are actually eliminated through the kidneys. And but if the body isn't able to do this on an ongoing basis, as soon as we give the body a long enough break between meals, it can begin to do this. So many people see massive benefits by intermittent fasting. I'll be honest with you. What I've noticed is that the benefits of intermittent fasting are basically, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the opposite. It depends on, they're related to how clean the diet is. The cleaner the diet is, the less benefit you get from intermittent fasting.
Right.
Because if you're eating only McDonald's, you ever see Super Size Me?
Yeah.
Documentary.
Yeah.
Morgan Spurlock lived on McDonald's for 30 days, right? if all you're eating is McDonald's, and instead of having that first nasty meal at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning, you wait until noon, you're going to be a lot better off because your body has those hours that it's not having to deal with that garbage, and that it can begin to process out some of the garbage that's already in your system. But there are some very cool things that happen. Human growth hormone is called the youthing hormone, and the body secretes human growth hormone all the time. It serves many different purposes, but it's being secreted. The body's constantly measuring the bloodstream, secreting it when necessary. When we are not processing food, the level begins to rise. And this is what allows the body to cleanse and heal itself much more rapidly. And so we literally begin to grow younger. I mean, when we are 16 hours into the process, it's thousands of times more human growth hormone in the bloodstream than there usually is with just 16 hours. When you get to 18 hours, it's even a little bit more. The problem is if you go much beyond that, let's say you're talking about fasting for 24 or 36 hours every week. I actually did this for 2.5 years. Years and years ago. I would eat dinner on Friday night. I would eat nothing. On Saturday night, I would eat dinner. I would eat nothing on Sunday, and I would have my first meal at around noon or 1 o'clock on Monday. So I was going more like 40 hours every week without food. What I didn't realize at the time was that every time I did that, my body was breaking down muscle. I wasn't getting into ketosis. I wasn't getting the really deep benefits. There was some benefit, but there was also some cost. So, go ahead.
Yeah. And in the intermittent fasts and full fasts, there are a few questions that have kind of come up. You know, I've listened to intermittent fasting experts on other podcasts, and I've kind of read some articles. What do you think about stuff like coffee, black coffee, as part of the fast? Do you agree with that or not?
Well, I don't agree with it. You know, I mean,
I didn't think you would.
No, right. I mean, you know, the thing about coffee is, coffee, you know, you can now, there are studies that show the health benefits of coffee, and there are studies that show the health benefits of alcohol, because alcohol relaxes you, that you tend to have fewer stress-related issues if you have a drink a day. But it's also poisoning your body. And coffee contains very powerful stimulants like caffeine. And when you take a stimulant, what happens is if you start out with energy, let's say your energy is relatively low, it's here, right? It's down here. I know you can see my hand, Tony, the listeners can't, but you know, it's relatively low. You drink a cup of coffee and you feel more energetic, right? Energy goes up. But what happens is you're actually stimulating your adrenal glands to produce more adrenaline, which it couldn't afford to produce. You know, you don't have the energy you need. That's why you're tired. And now you feel energetic, but it's because you're using up every drop of energy your body has. And when the coffee wears off, what happens is you're more depleted than where you started. So I don't recommend that people use stimulants, except for in very specific circumstances. For instance, coffee, ironically, interestingly, coffee was the first major shift that I made in my own diet and lifestyle. I realized 6 months, right? Well, I realized 6 months out of college that I was addicted to coffee. I was going back for my 5th or 6th cup before lunch.
But is it actually taking you out of your fast if you have coffee? Is the body starting to metabolize it?
Probably not. But I wouldn't recommend doing it anyway.
Oh, brilliant! That means I can do it. Yeah. Okay.
It probably won't affect you that way, but I don't think it's a good idea because it's stimulating and leaving you more depleted.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. And so anyway. You were on the 5 or 6 cup. I mean, listen, and I know that, and I know the instinct is when you're tired. And I was chatting to a colleague of mine at Sky yesterday who's been working 21 days in a row, and she said, I've been having more coffees because I just kind of need to get through. And actually, what you're saying is that doesn't help. In fact, you're going to be more tired after the coffee wears off.
That's right. I mean, it helps you temporarily, but it always leaves you more exhausted than you started. Every stimulant does the same thing. Yeah. Cocaine, speed, coffee, sugar, excess protein does the same thing. You'll feel the same way.
What about taking supplements if you're doing the intermittent fasting? If you take a pill, let's say, when you wake up or last thing at night, would your body start to metabolize that as if it's food?
It would. Any calories or nutrients will take you out of the process.
Okay, so bulletproof coffee would be out on that one as well then, like a kind of butter and kind of MCT oil or something like that.
I have no idea what bulletproof coffee is, but if it's regular black coffee with nothing in there besides coffee, you might be okay.
Yeah.
If you put sugar, cream in it, it probably wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Anything else in there would probably take you out of the process.
Well, I mean, bulletproof coffee is like fat, so it's literally, it would be grass-fed butter and MCT oil, so kind of highly refined coconut oil.
Right. No, you wouldn't be able to use that. While fasting.
Yeah. Wow. And then how often do you fast? I mean, you said you did that for a while. You did the Saturday night to Monday morning thing. What are you? We know your kind of day-to-day schedule, but how often do you do a longer fast now?
Well, I don't do longer fasts now unless there's some specific need to. So, for instance, I was back in mid-August. I'd come home, the front door was locked. We were closed. We operate here in sessions. So at the time, we had no clients here. My staff was gone for the day. I came in. My key broke off in the front door lock, and I had no other way to get in. So I came around the back. I climbed over the wall around my private garden. I knew I could jimmy my back door if I needed to, and it was drizzling. You know, here in Costa Rica we have a 7-month rainy season where I live. It was drizzling at the time. I'm in the same stylish footwear that I always wear. That's my flip flops, and on the top of the wall in the rain, I slipped. I fell onto my back 2.5 meters, and onto concrete, and I could barely move for 3 days. I really thought I'd broken my spine.
Yeah.
So I ate nothing. I fasted because I wanted my body. It wasn't about cleansing. It was about healing. I wanted my body to put all of its energy into healing the body. And I would have fasted longer, but I had travel that I couldn't avoid 8 days later. So I fasted for 7 days. I started eating, and I took off the next day to Miami because I needed to get there on business. Normally, depending on what it was, I might have fasted for 2, 3, or even longer, more weeks than that, depending on what was happening. In the last 20 plus years, I have severed an artery in my wrist in 2 places, as well as all the flexor tendons, all the nerves on one side of my hand. I've broken 2 ribs. I've broken 7 fingers, 2 toes, both knees. My right hip.
Accident prone, Loren, aren't you?
Well, I don't do so much this now, but I've ridden motorcycles since I was 18. I've used to skydive. I surf. I used to rock climb. I've motorcycle accidents, skiing accidents, rock climbing. Yes, I've broken some bones. Everything heals, and it heals incredibly quickly with fasting. Unbelievably how fast.
I mean, it's interesting, because we've spoken quite a bit more about longer fasts than I expected, but it's all good, and I'm fascinated by it. People listening might be already doing intermittent fasting, might not be. They might well try that, and they might try something up to kind of 24 hours. What's the longest that you would recommend people do in London or LA or wherever they're listening now without any expert help?
Well, I would say probably no more than 5 to 7 days. But here's the thing: you have to be resting. It's critically important that you rest. So if you're working a busy schedule, you can't really be doing this. You have to take the time off. And as you understand, I mean, my clients come here for an average of 5 weeks. They're away from home. There's nothing they need to do. We have internet access if they need to get online, but otherwise they spend most of their time just resting in this amazingly beautiful environment. Beautiful gardens, jungle, etc. We have lots of places they can hang out, but that's what you want to do. So most people, and it's not really that most people are going to do such a great job without knowing exactly what's happening, what they need to do. But most people aren't going to hurt themselves too badly in 7 days. It sounds crazy because I know most people have probably never imagined you could go 7 days without eating and be okay. Yeah. But that's actually, in this world, that's a relatively short time.
It does sound crazy, but I'll have to kind of, put the usual disclaimer in. This is not medical advice. See your doctor first, and then I don't have any responsibility if you do a 7-day fast and it doesn't work out well.
Fair enough. I personally wouldn't make that recommendation, but it's your show.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know. I mean, if you say it, then you've said it.
You're protected.
But not necessarily a doctor. I mean, I'm a big fan of some kind of functional health practitioner who you can talk to about supplementation and your test results and so on.
You want to have someone guiding you through the process that understands the process. It's a natural process. It's kind of similar. It's kind of similar to childbirth. There probably aren't many female listeners who would consider having a baby without someone on hand who understood the process. Maybe it's a doula, maybe it's a midwife, maybe it's not a doctor. Babies born at home without doctors, by the way, statistically are much healthier than babies born in hospitals.
Oh, interesting.
So there's a good reason to not medicalize a non-medical process.
I wonder if that's something to do with like light, sterilized conditions, probably a lot to do with light, the lights in a hospital.
It could be. It could be lots. I mean, first of all, and kind of off the subject, but most babies are born, a woman's lying on her back, trying to push a bowling ball-sized object through a very small opening. That makes no sense. If you ever saw Dances with Wolves, the Native American woman squats down with her back against a tree and lets gravity help. Yeah. And this is what happens. And of course, today, one of the things that I see and measure, as I said before, with thousands of people is most people are severely dehydrated. Dehydrated tissue doesn't stretch very well.
Right.
So when people are properly hydrated, childbirth is much easier. But there might be a lot of trauma for the baby and the mother, given the way that babies are being delivered today. It's for the doctor's convenience, not because it actually makes sense for the delivery.
The final question that I ask everyone is, what is one book that you would recommend and one tip for more energy and vitality? I've got a feeling I might know what your tip is, but what would you say? So one book that's it doesn't have to be to do with your kind of subject of expertise, or it might be, but just something that you think would be really useful to people listening.
Okay. Tony, as you know, I didn't know these questions were coming.
No worries.
Let's see. The most powerful book I could recommend. That's hard. There's so many amazing books. Wow.
It might be a podcast, or it might be a film, or it might be a website. It can really be any kind of resource that you think people might find useful.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that question if I may.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm sorry. The second question was,
what is one tip that you would give people to live with more energy, vitality, and motivation?
Okay, the one tip, if I could only say one thing, it would be, eliminate processed foods from your diet. Eat as much fresh food as possible. Whether it's 100% as I do, or it's only 50%. The more fresh food you eat, which is high water content food, typically fresh, raw food, the better off you are. I'm a 26-year raw vegan. I know for a fact that, I've worked with thousands of clients. Everyone who does this sees amazing things shift for them over and over again, almost without exception. Now, it can be tricky, and if people need help, one of the things I do is I coach people over Skype. I'm happy to help. That's what I'm here for. I think you probably found me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel with hundreds of videos, tons of free information for people. I come to the UK regularly. I'll actually be speaking in London in late July.
Great.
I'll be speaking at a big event outside of London. Then I think I'll be doing some events in London. Then I'm going over to speak in the Channel Islands, actually.
Great. Yeah.
Which will be.
Yeah.
But let's come back to the other question. If I can think of something, there's so many things that have been so powerful for me, but I'd like to give the most powerful, and I'm not really sure at this moment what it is. That's a tough one. I wish I'd been prepared for it.
Yeah, don't worry. You can come back to me, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
And we'll kind of put that in as a good little extra resource for people to come and find.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
The guy who fasted for 4.5 months. Yeah. And the cancer had gone.
Yeah, no trace of cancer. And by the way, we see that happen as little as 21 days. I had my oldest client ever was a man who turned 91 while fasting with me. And he came to me because he had a tumor in his throat that had grown to the extent that he could barely breathe, speak, or swallow. They wanted to do an emergency tracheotomy, punch a hole in his throat, and then they wanted to go and take the tumor out. And he wasn't really excited about either of those things. Yeah. And so a friend of his referred him to me. His friend had heard me speak in Manhattan and referred him to me. He contacted me. We were in the U.S. at the time. And he said, "Can this help me?" And I said, "We've never worked with anyone with a cancer in the larynx. I don't know, but we usually see great results with cancer." And so he came. He spent 30 days fasting at the age of 90, 91.
Wow.
He refed. He spent 6 weeks with us, went home. After 12 days of eating again, his son rushed him to the hospital for this emergency procedure because his son and his doctor imagined that he'd be much worse off 6 weeks later, that it would have kept growing. They rolled him into the ER to take out this tumor, and they can't find it. It's disappeared. Okay? We've seen this over and over again. There is no more.
Yeah. That's really cool.
I know it's mind-blowing. I am all, by the way, I'm all about helping people live with the most vitality and energy possible, and more than that, maximize their potential, because I believe everyone is born with amazing gifts, right? You found something you're very passionate about. You're helping a lot of people by bringing information to people, life-changing information. I've found something I'm very passionate about. I do the same thing here. Most people, I think, never figure that out. So that's what I'm all about, is helping people accomplish those things. If you want to get into to more conversations later, I'd be glad to schedule it with you sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I have a feeling people are going to want to do more research. Where can they find out more about you and everything you do in Costa Rica?
Sure. Well, you can go to www.tanglewood Wellness Center, and that's American Center, CENTR.com, right? TanglewoodWellnessCenter.com. You can also go to YouTube and put my name in, Loren Lockman, LorenLockman. Perhaps you can provide links to these channels. So the links will be down below, and there's tons of free information there. You can email me through the website or at info@TanglewoodWellnessCenter.com if you have questions, if I can help you. You can find me on Facebook. Tanglewood has a page on Facebook as well. Anything I can do to help your listeners, I'm happy to do.
Good man. Loren, really good to talk to you.
Pleasure.
And I've got a feeling I'm going to have to start doing some slightly longer fasts, but I'm looking forward to it. And I really appreciate you coming on.
I'll tell you something, Tony. I'll say this publicly if it's okay with you. If you can schedule yourself for 4 weeks and come spend a month with me, I guarantee you will leave here healthier than you've ever been in your life.
Wow.
You'll feel it. I won't have to convince you. You'll feel it yourself.
Yeah. All the fresh water I can drink for 4 weeks.
Exactly. And when the time comes, it's 3 weeks of fasting, 1 week of feeding. We have amazing papayas, watermelons, pineapples, mangoes. It's some amazing high quality food. We have more than 100 varieties of fruit growing on site.
Wow.
It's incredible. It's paradise here.
Loren, it sounds it. Great to talk to you, and thanks for coming on Zestology.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that's it. Thanks, Loren. And if you are a bookworm yourself, or a bit of a book geek, or you don't actually get to read that much because you don't have time, which is definitely the case for a lot of people, but you'd like to read more, there are loads of suggestions at the Zestology Book Club. And to join that, you can head to Facebook, but you might already be a member, and now you can add other people. So you can literally just go in and click friends of yours who might like books as well. Head to the Zestology Book Club and just click add friends. I think that's what it is. You can add your friends, which is wonderful. So I'm continuing to wander around the park here in London, and we are giving away a Joovv light. It's going to be next week now. We're going to give away a combo original Joovv light, delivering infrared light for more energy and for enhanced skincare and better health, improved fitness. There are so many ways that the Joovv light can work, and actually I think realigning your circadian rhythms is one of them. Using it in the morning, first thing in the morning on a dull, grey, murky, dank London day, and all of a sudden you've got this nuclear style light lighting up your living room. It's quite a nice way to kind of feel like you're sunbathing somewhere a little bit warmer than here right now. So that's coming next week. If you'd like a Joovv light, and if you'd like to kind of whet the appetite, then I did an interview with Scott Nelson, the founder of Joovv, on previous Zestologies. And by the way, just to let you know that of many of the biohacks and the various health tweaks that come up on this podcast, infrared light is perhaps one of the best researched and most clinically and scientifically proven, the benefits. So yeah, it's good. Okay, well that is pretty much it. Thank you for listening as always. Thank you to Loren, and I'll see you next time.